the left and right, or if we are to be a bit more specific, the populist left and the populist right have been becoming increasingly
Have
similar,
been
or
becoming
basically the
increasingly
same. I could hear myself twice. Uh, and we could see it in a different iterations. The one we'll cover today is Cenk Uygur coming on Tucker Carlson. He was there because I think this was in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk murder. I think this was recorded about 5 days ago. So they talked about how basically Cenk Uygur is becoming closer and much more friendly to some parts of the right. Later, we might even bring up some of the, let's say, mainstream politics examples of basically the left and right coming in together to basically become anti-American. And if we have time, we might just mention this. Basically, the Young Turks did like a 9/11 truthism or whatever you call it live on shows, which, funnily enough, was again connected to Tucker Carlson. Welcome to the reality show. Joining me today is Nicholas Provenzo. Thank you for joining me today. And
My pleasure.
so, yeah, we have a bunch of clips, but before we go there, Nicholas, what do you think generally of this left and right coming in together or becoming very much dissimilar to each other? Because in some ways you could say it really goes back really far, but I think this sort of recent phenomenon is interesting. Any thoughts before we go in?
Well, I think it's interesting. That I was looking at some of the clips, and there's this recurring theme that we're protecting the little guy against the rapacious oppressors wherever they may be. So as long as you accept that posture, it's only a matter of course that they would find common ground. They and of course they're borrowing on the same premise. They're not looking at individuals. They're looking at class structure, where the defenders of the workers, the working class, the people against again the powers that be, the corporations, the deep state, the powers that be, whatever that may be. So they're not talking about principles. They're really like a common Marxist premise of class warfare, class bile, and it makes sense that they would meet on certain points. Not everywhere, but certain points. It absolutely follows. And then they would try and build coalitions, because what are you trying to do if you're a political activist? Broaden your base, find common ground where you didn't think it was possible. So if you do share certain premises, by all means, you would attempt to highlight those in order to increase your allies, even if you don't agree on every single point. So I think it absolutely follows from where both groups are coming from intellectually.
Yeah, and oftentimes, and even Cheng brings this up, right? Like we don't agree on everything, and I always bring up the point: if you agree on, because it's not like every single day, every single political issue is considered, right? You always have sort of, this is the bill that's going through Congress. This is what the president's agenda is right now, and if I see somebody in, let's say, since Trump's inauguration, if you agree with every single thing he did, which oftentimes somebody like Cenk Uygur does it, then who cares that you like don't agree on him with other things if you agree with every single sort of like action he took? Because on some short-term level, this is what matters. So I mean, I guess I could bring up this example. Basically, Bernie Sanders has came out in agreement. Now, this was earlier this year that Trump brought up that the idea of capping the credit
Having
card
credit cards, right?
interest rates, and Bernie Sanders came out in support of it. So I don't care that you guys don't agree with everything. If you push this really terrible thing, because that like capping interest rates are one of the most important sort of signals in the free market, and already that's to a large extent controlled by the government through the somewhat indirectly through the Fed. but putting even more controls on it. I don't care that you might not agree on everything. This would be a terrible
You
thing.
share the two share common ground on something truly horrific, and that's using state power to coerce free transactions. What does the interest rate signal? It signals the amount of risk that someone sees in lending you money. So unsecured credit card debt is expensive to finance. It comes with a lot of risk. It's not, again, it's not a secured debt. So if someone doesn't pay the credit card bill, the credit card company is out of luck. It's hard to go to court. It's expensive to go to court. Any number of things. So debt collection is expensive. So that is reflected in the interest rate. But if you're going to all of a sudden, wave your political wand and say any interest rate above my preferred rate is illegal, then you've just removed access to credit, the ability to freely trade to anybody who wants to borrow money and anybody who wants to lend on those terms. So it's basically, the minimum wage applied to credit and or price controls applied to, it's more price controls applied to credit. And what does that get you? It gets you stagnation, it gets you devastation, no more payday loans if you're trying to, be a small business and you're waiting for the check to clear and pay your staff, anything like that. It's sand in the gears of progress, and yet both are absolutely on fire for it. There you go. They share. They are birds of a feather. They might wear different colors. They might align on different camps, but when it comes to the core essential, are they willing to abuse government power to serve their ends? Absolutely. Well, there you go. Surprise, surprise.
Now let's take a look at actually these clips. So the whole video is, I think, 3 hours. The Cheng Yuger clip or Cheng Yuger part is about 15 minutes, and I think we have about 6 clips I brought up from that. So let's watch the first one.
We were at the RNC in 2024, and Charlie came by at our booth and said, "Hey, do you guys want to talk?" And we were a little bit taken aback by that. We were really surprised by it. And Anna and I, Anna Kasparian is my co-host on the Young Turks,
Yes.
talked it over and said, yeah, we would like to talk. And so he came on the show, and so we had our disagreements. So it's interesting that you have me on here, partly for the reasons that, your friend texted you about. Oh, well, that's strange, right? Left and right. And so I don't agree with everything that you, Megan, and Scott said about Charlie.
I'm sure.
Right. But I think that's what makes it more interesting. So the willingness to talk to us, even though we were so entrenched on different sides, right?
Okay, so I think I brought up already most of the points around this clip. So, but just to summarize them, he says, how it's surprising that left and right would like talk to each other. Which again, you have to think in principles that even more fundamentally, the left and right are not different in a way that both of them agree government has a role to play in the economy, in your personal life, and you could go on and on the list. In the First Amendment, as we've seen both recently and under the previous administration. So already there is not a problem. And we'll go when he starts bringing up specific points and just take his list and then ask yourself like what else is there, and we'll
I would just add, also remember that both of them are political entertainers. I mean, that's really their trade. So there's nothing that would say this isn't a person I would talk to. The more inflammatory the person, the better. I'm surprised, they haven't had neo-Nazis or what. Well, they Hanson Tucker, is that the whole thing? He's got Hitler apologists on his show, where there's no ground that they won't cross or whatever. There's no barrier. I won't do that. That kind of guess would be too much. So this is their lock, stock, and trade. So yeah, of course it's not surprising.
Yeah, and it's also weird. I never know how to feel about sort of like leftists like Chang's, like saying we have disagreements. I mean, as you brought up, disagreements with Tucker Carlson would be, do we bring on a neo-Nazi or a Nazi apologist who says Winston Churchill was the real war criminal Is that like a disagreement you simply have? There is a difference between, maybe I don't want to call it specific people, but I disagree with somebody on like what the tariffs should be or how should that be used when it comes to negotiations. And then doing like Nazi apologia or talking to somebody that wants to nationalize economy. Like there's a difference between a certain kind of
Well,
disagreements.
that's always the question with platforming. If you platform someone whose views are reprehensible, are you in fact sanctioning the reprehensible views, or are you doing a discussion? And that's that cost benefit analysis that you have to take in any form of engagement. I mean, in my life, I've debated all kinds of people, but there are people that I would not debate, and typically those who are actively seeking to implement violence now. Anyone else, especially if like it's on a college campus or something like that, well, they're fair game. They're the pinata that I'll beat on to show the efficacy of my ideas. But you have to be careful. Again, there's always a context to it. But is it shocking that Tucker Carlson would talk to the Young Turks guy, given all the absolute moonbats and crazy people that he's platformed and it treated as if they were serious intellectuals without any condemnation? No, not in the least.
Yeah, and I think Cheng brings up the idea of platforming later, but I didn't include it because I didn't have that much to say. But one thing I would say about platforming, also there is a difference between, inviting somebody, and I don't remember the other guy, but somebody like Ian Carroll, let's say for example, and just letting him, and this is my biggest problem with Joe Rogan, right? Inviting somebody and just letting him go on with absolutely like, oh, absolutely no
Yeah, no
pushback, absolutely
questions, no
nothing.
challenge.
Yeah, it's a difference between that and inviting somebody, let's say recently PB Law or Patrick Bet-David invited Nick Fuentes on his show. I haven't watched it, so I don't have an opinion, although I don't
Right,
have
right.
a high
But just
opinion
what,
of.
what you know about Nick Fuentes is, for you pronounce his name, is enough to like, ooh, do I want to really be talking with him because
Well,
he's
well, it's
just
more about Patrick Bet-David because I don't think somebody like that and give a proper pushback because.
if okay, I see your point. Yeah, I would agree. If you're able to challenge them intelligently and thoughtfully so that it comes out like, hey, you have some premises here and I'm going to check them and let's see what you have to say in the face of those checks. And then, it'll be revealing because you will see them if they're if they're consistently dishonest, you'll see them for what they are. And that would be an effective interview. But if it's just, let them pontificate on your, 2 million plus subscriber show, that's not particularly good.
Yeah, and I think that probably plays the biggest role, the sort of honesty part, because I think somebody like Nick Fuentes is absolutely dishonest when it comes to his views, and a lot of, I don't want to call them extremists, but a lot of people with certain ideas are actively trying to hide it and not really commit. I think somebody. And I'm trying to think of his name, and I cannot. Maybe somebody can remind me. He's like a neo-Nazi who basically is sometimes sort of hiding what he really means, but isn't like actual neo-Nazi who wants like a white ethno-state in America, but is sort of like jokey around it. But let's watch the next clip.
And so then when we started the conversation, what wound up happening, it surprised us. So did we still have our disagreements about the black pilot line, this, that, and other thing? Of course we did, right? But when we started talking about corporate rule, he agreed. And I remember, like, I want to go back and watch the first interview we did with him at the RNC there because I was kind of shocked by it. It's like, really? You're also worried about corporations having too much power and right? Because that Tucker, you can understand that was
Yes.
a left-wing position for a long time in this
Yeah,
country.
it was.
But the battle has been joined. And so that is an incredible development in American politics that mainstream media, I think, has chosen to ignore because it's inconvenient for them.
So,
It's almost laughable. Can I take it?
Yeah, sure. You can start.
Okay. So he's acting like it's some sort of revelation to him that there are people on the right who are worried about the corporations. And now, what planet has he been on? Because I know tons of people who are worried about regulatory capture and who captures regulations and how they do that. And those are typically business interests, which are trying to use the government in order to set a favorable condition for themselves. I'll give you the classic example. When the American with Disabilities Act was being considered, Marriott Hotels was quite vociferous in support of it. Well, why? They had already been ADA compliant without the ADA regulations for years in advance, because that was their business practice, was to build hotels that could accommodate people with different needs. So this was kind of a nice way to impose all of a sudden costs on their competitors, which were behind them in that foresight. So that would be a case of, well, we want to have people be able to access hotels. Let's use it as a battering ram against our competitors in order to do it, because we're already there. That happens all the time. And again, there's a term for it: regulatory capture. So to pretend that, this is some sort of new phenomenon and that there are people on that no one on the right is aware of it, it's just laughable. So I'm sorry that you don't know enough about what people on the so-called right think, that you think that this is shocking. Does that make sense?
Well, I think it's also something playing a little bit different, because in some ways that would be to some extent valid criticism of let's say corporations, of them. And I think even Amazon or Jeff Bezos did that at some point, when they brought up the minimum wage of all of their workers, and then they advocated for basically
Right,
raising
right.
the minimum wage, which I think is a problem. But this is not what these people mean, because their problem is not that. Their problem is the existence of corporations itself, especially. I mean, it reminds me, since we also have Tucker Carlson here, when he still had a show on Fox, he had Cornel West on his show. Cornel West is a presidential independent candidate. He's basically, I mean, he's a self-described socialist. So is that?
Yeah, a leftist intellectual. He's at
Yeah,
Harvard or
and
Yale, or one of them, right?
and when Tucker Carlson asked him sort of what is socialism, Cornel West something, well, it's about the big and powerful being, and I don't know the right word for it, but sort of being responsive, or being, basically they need to take care of the less powerful, being responsible for the less powerful, something like that. And Tucker Carlson was like, well, if that's what socialism is, then I'm basically on board.
Right.
And so this shows that it's not about their problem with, let's say, corporations or capitalism, is not that corporations use the government to do something, because again, corporations or companies or individuals can only do something with the government because the government has that power. If government didn't have power to regulate the economy, the private companies wouldn't be able to do anything, because it's
Right.
always push and pull. You cannot just control without giving basically power back, because again, what is a government? It's simply people we elect, so everybody gets a choice. So you can never have a system where the government is controlling and doing everything, and somehow nobody is able to grab the benefit out of it.
Are they it they are envious of, I mean, what's a corporation? A group of people assembled for a productive purpose. What's a successful corporation? People are actually good at it. So there's that envy and the hatred of a successful corporation on the left that is being more and more embraced by the right when that corporation doesn't do the right's bidding. So again, if you play in my sandbox, just like what was Trump's recent statement about ABC reinstating Jimmy Kimmel? Oh, we're gonna have to go after them. if they were the Trump parrot network, where all they do is praise Trump 24/7, I'm sure he'd have nothing to negative to say about them. But now they're doing something he doesn't like. He's interested in it. They're the corporation we're going to get after. We're going to bring those bastards to their knees. Yeah, I mean, again, it's comfort with using power for illegitimate purposes. So I would agree with that. My point before was just simply, there are problems with corporations too, and that's fair to discuss them. But no, what your point is, and I fully agree with it, is these two guys, Tucker Carlson and the Young Turks speaker, are both aligned on the nefarious use, the immoral use of government power to bring
Yeah,
the
let me
successful
just
to
give
their
you
needs.
their solution is not the divorce between economy
No, not in the least.
and
We'll run it
government.
better. Yeah.
I mean, let me see if I had something else to bring up. I mean, so again, this like hate corporal rule. What does it mean? What does it mean even for corporations to rule? Is them existing, them having the ability to do something? Because this is always what happens, right? There doesn't exist a product, something is not there, some individual or some company or some group of individuals come in, create something new, we get used to having that thing, and suddenly this is a right, this is like a god-given, you have to have it, and it has to be government provided, or government has to control the price of it, or basically it becomes like a public good. And this is fundamentally anti-American, because the idea that if you are too successful, suddenly you need to take care of the public good. Suddenly you are somebody who's responsible for the public. This is no longer your private venture. This is no longer your private company. This is some uh, public thing that has stakeholders, right? This is the sort of like
Right.
new thing,
Yeah,
the
the buzzword
stakeholder
stakeholder.
capitalism, that now we have to be involved because you're simply too successful for your own good. And I think this is the reason why I think it's deeply American, because the idea that, yeah, you get punished for being successful, I think goes against, I mean, any state that has the pursuit of one's happiness in its uh, Declaration of Independence.
Right. Well, I mean, they're trying to put a gloss on from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. So, the successful have this obligation to care for, again, the stakeholder capitalism, and to hell with you if you don't, and we're going to make you if you won't. And the willingness to embrace coercion to achieve their ends. And the Tucker Carlson right and the Trump MAGA right is very comfortable with coercion in areas where the free market people carried more sway, but they carry no sway now. The freedom people are, I mean, where? Show me one, two, if you can, if it's a good day, who are outspoken and effective, and they're not there. So
Yeah, I think like Ted Cruz came out and said something about the Trump's
Ted Cruz
ABC.
actually came out and said something good. I know,
Uh,
on the Jimmy Kimmel fiasco. Yeah, he condemned the FCC and tacitly the administration for their posture. There's also the Ted Cruz that let Trump ridicule his wife and just took it like there was another day at the office. I don't trust
yeah,
Ted
this
Cruz
was
as
not
far
like
as
an
I could throw.
endorsement of Ted Cruz
I
for.
know, I know. I'm not taking that, but it is funny. Like, yeah, they actually came out. That was interesting. I don't know what to
Uh,
make of that. I don't know if it's a long-term trend where, this is the question I struggle with. Madisonian government was ambition checks ambition. So you would have a Congress check the executive, and you would have ambitious members of Congress check the executive. The party system has kind of thrown a monkey wrench in that. And the party system today is far more disciplined than the party system back in the day. And so I struggle with what actually checks the party system. And, why don't you see more defections? I mean, there is one guy who I do like. His name's Don Bacon, and he's a representative from Nebraska, and he's very pro-Israel. He's very pro-Ukraine. And so he's not and he's outspoken. He condemns the administration for embracing Putin. He condemns the administration for being soft on Hamas, and he's very good about it and very consistent. And yet, I noticed you were kind of straining. Like, have I ever heard of this guy before?
No, I was
That's the
looking him
problem.
up. That's
Right. That's the problem. And I got him on my X feed, and I see him all the time. I'm like, I'm like love, machine gunning all day with him because he's really good. Does he hold sway? Not enough. Not
Yeah,
nearly
I
enough.
think when it comes to, I always say, even when people bring up like problems in the free market, in capitalism, or in governance, I think fundamentally you need good people to uphold a good system. If you go to the past when Richard Nixon had the Watergate, it was his party that basically said, "Okay, you're going down. We
Right.
will not handle like your problem." And so you had that, and you had that to some extent on both sides. But yeah, once that disappears, once in a sense it's a party of men, of like one man rather than this grouping of people, I think to some extent it still helps, and this is what I like about the American election system, in a way that you have basically constituencies and senators sort of voting instead of that being like a national election. Because if you have that one guy who, somebody, even you can say like Bernie Sanders, right? He's technically not with either side. Well, he aligns with Democrats, but technically is not a
Right. He's
part of
he's
Democratic
he
Party.
wasn't independent for
Yeah,
years.
and I think you can find some people like that on the right as well. Well, if somebody like that is popular in his own constituency, he doesn't have to care what the party thinks. He doesn't have to care what the president is saying if he himself has enough power. So I think that is giving it some counterbalance, but even that only goes so far, and even that can be used by president, right? A president holds a lot of sway in who is running in specific constituencies. So I think fundamentally there is no like government we could institute that would solve it. You need good people and good representatives.
That I agree with you. I mean, you can't have a political system that exceeds the virtue of its people, and so yeah, that's where the moral philosophic revolution must come first. And I mean, I think you can ratchet and leapfrog it and bootstrap it to a certain degree by using platforms as bully pulpits. So if I was a member of Congress, you can be sure that I would be, banging on the ramparts as hard as I could. But also, I'd probably have to be comfortable if it was only serving 1 or 2 terms because it's very difficult to stay in. It's a perverse incentive when people are using the state for illegitimate ends, and the people who assist them are rewarded, and the people who are trying to stand against that are outsiders. That makes it hard. It would be nice if, like you said, there were more people willing to just, my principles will not support this, and I don't care if I get unelected next term. There was so when I was a young conservative so many moons ago, there was a group called the Young Americas Foundation. They're still around, and an interesting group. And they would have their summer conferences, and they would invite conservative Democrats to speak. And I wasn't even aware that this was such a thing. This was the early 90s when I was at George Washington University. And one of the gentlemen who spoke was a member of Congress, Charlie Stedholm. And he was a Texan, and he gave through all the reasons why he was a Democrat but considered himself a conservative. And it was an interesting discussion. And he said, and if my constituents don't agree with my stance, I expect to be unelected. But he wasn't going to compromise his stance. The audience, which was young conservatives, was appalled because they were like, why aren't you doing what your constituents want? You should be their mouthpiece and their mouthpiece only. And he's like, no, I have principles. There are lines that I will not cross. And if I won't cross them, if people don't like that, I expect to lose my next election. I'm at peace with that. And I thought that was, whatever he stood for, I thought at least he has the courage of his convictions and the willingness to say, this Congress job is not my life. My principles are my life. And I really had a lot of respect for that. This is before I was even introduced to objectivism. But someone who chose principle. And again, I was shocked at how angry the crowd was. He lost the crowd, and maybe 100 people. He lost the group of students, him speaking, when he said there are principles that I will not compromise in the name of my position. And well, that's our culture. There you go. We want, people to, where's the wind blowing? Oh, I'll go that way. That was Bill Clinton's famous shtick with the triangulation, where, I have my leftist principles, but I also have what the people want. I'm going to try and find a nice happy ground and get the most that I can out of that. And it's definitely Trumpism, where, he just goes by his gut instinct of whatever, a American like him would think. And, so, hey, all these immigrants, we got to send them back. They're ruining everything. You can't even walk into a 7-Eleven without hearing 5 languages. Stuff like that. And yeah, there's a huge swath of America which agrees with that, and he speaks to them, and he's their mouthpiece. So, yuck.
We have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. And a super chat from Bronx Guy Gun Hill Road. Thank you so much. Deborah in the chat says, "Not true, Daniel. My family was friends with Carol Hallett, who was extremely popular with her constituency, yet was gerrymandered out of her district because she would not follow the party bosses." And yeah, when I said ideally, I mean, that's the sort of a problem with gerrymandering, and I think now we have both. I'm not sure what stage it is in, but I know the governor of Texas wanted to basically redraw some of the lines to basically give the edge to Trump. To which I think Gavin Newsom responded with saying, "We'll draw our lines to get more of our people." So yeah. That's the thing. It's no system is safe from people who simply want more power. It's we can design those systems. So that's why I say ideally, I think the constituency system works better in the way that theoretically you have sort of like people you respond to simply in your own district, and you don't have to back the party line. But yeah, if then your party cuts you from the funding, or if your party cuts you or redraws the lines to get you out, well, yeah, that makes it pretty hard to continue. Anything to add? Because we have a bit more clips.
Well, it kind of reminds. This was an interesting intellectual experience when I went back to law school as an adult learner. So I was already in my 40s when I went to law school, and a lot of my professors were on the left. And I always enjoyed talking with them, though, because even if I didn't agree with them, it was always interesting to learn their perspective and try and figure out what they thought was important, relevant. And sometimes it's like, I didn't understand that. I didn't appreciate that about that view, even though I don't agree with it. And I would imagine that if a rational political leader in dealing with their constituents would be the same way. You have your core principles, but there are also a lot of facts that you are just simply not aware of. Like, how does this work? Or why does that work? Or especially in today's mixed economy where there's so much regulation and you're trying to sort what's the best way to reduce the burden of the state without immediately getting unelected or being unelectable, finding that happy medium so that you're moving the ball forward without making it impossible for you to even be part of the discussion. And, so there's a place for listening to others and gaining their insight. And I've constantly benefited from those discussions, even with opponents. But again, I would have to agree with the Charlie Stidholm. There are also core principles. And it's abhorrent to me that so many people on both political parties just are completely comfortable with coercion, completely comfortable. So I want to use it as a tool to get after this guy. I want to use it as a tool to get after that guy. I want to, use it as a tool for the third guy. And that's the problem. And so, how do you shift the debate to talking about coercion? And just, in the objectivist community, let's talk about, the response to the censorship threats in the face of the Charlie Kirk murder. It was clearly horrific that Charlie Kirk was murdered for speaking on a campus, the realm of ideas. That's as repugnant as it gets. Whatever you thought about Charlie Kirk's ideas. But now you have the government coming around. We're going to go after firms that refuse to print Charlie Kirk posters. And we're going to use the coercive power of the state to punish them. We're going to use the coercive power of the state to punish broadcasters who, air comedians who ridicule the things that we find sacred. and there are a host of objectivists, people who call themselves free speech objectivists, who say they're perfectly fine with that. That's great. This is finally a one-upmanship on all the awful things that a communist like Jimmy Kimmel stood for. And so I just ask myself, how is it that people who claim affinity for Ayn Rand are comfortable with coercion, when the whole point of Galt's speech and the actions of the character, or Howard Rourke's need to be free was and live his life for his own sake, was that coercion is not an effective tool for anything other than self-defense. And so I struggle with where the culture is now and where my fellow objectivists are now, because I find myself often mystified by some of the things I'm seeing.
I do want to go to more clips, so I'll just give a quick thought on that. I think on some level, I mean, the easiest answer is, of course, rationalism, right? It's you might have your principles, but if at the end of the day you can think your way out of anything, then it becomes pretty easy. And then I think there is also something about the idea of principles, and I think people don't realize that principles are pretty much only challenged when you actually disagree with sort of something that is being targeted, right? It's like your principle would never be your boss comes to you and says, if you don't, if you do not go and kill somebody, I will not give you a 5% like pay rise. Like something like clear like that, like pretty easy to do something. It's always gonna be something like, hey, look, this and I think even Ayn Rand wrote about it, right? Free speech defense always comes, I think she wrote specifically about hardcore pornography. It's like she has no like for even like soft pornography because she thought it degrades sex, which she found valuable, but she
Right.
understood like it's always this thing that will be targeted first. It's always somebody like Jimmy Kimmel, and I don't want to use him as an example of not funny late night show, but it's kind of it won't start with, and I don't even know what's like a really good like stand up, but it won't find or like you said, it won't find somebody. It won't start with somebody you agree with or somebody that is popular. It will start with somebody that both says something that people find distasteful and to some extent rightfully so, and somebody that is sort of like easy to argue against. So that's just one quick thought on that. But I do wanna, because we have a bunch more clips, so let's watch.
Oh, thank you for the 15
Oh,
bull moose. Thank you for the gift.
okay. Thank you, Bulmus, for the super chat. He says, while it may not be objectively correct to get revenge on your opponents, there's a benefit in having them taste their own medicine. No, I mean, depends what you mean revenge. If it means like killing the other side, then absolutely no. And I mean, again, it does depend. What do you mean by getting them taste of their own medicine? If we are
Yeah, I think
talking
that's
like,
a.
yeah.
I agree with Daniel. I think that's it's certainly tempting, but it would be the wrong play. What do we want? We want justice, and what is justice? Give a person what they deserve. By what standard? Human life. So
Oh,
that
just
means that you
quickly,
could
he
identify. You could identify. This is where I disagree. This is why I think you're wrong. But censorship for someone who promotes censorship, no, I wouldn't support that, because again, it's not a scalpel by any sense. It's a bludgeon, and invariably it'll come back to haunt me. So no, what I want is to recognize that speech without a threat of imminent violence, without fraud, without libel, is speech. And that means it's the realm of ideas. The realm of ideas must be kept sacred and free for everyone, even people who apps to me, or again, utter fraud, that are well established in the law. And I think American law gets it right pretty much most of the time. I don't agree with this commercial speech doctrine, but put that on the margins. The core of First Amendment jurisprudence recognizes that speech is speech, must be left free. And it just feels like we're in an incredibly retrograde era when you have both parties pimping anti-free speech ideas, and that's dangerous.
Yeah,
And
just
so no,
quickly.
I don't want it for my enemy just because as much as I can appreciate the sentiment, the tribal part of me, yeah, sure, but the principal part of me says no, veto on that. That's not how the world works, or should work, or must work. So
Yeah, just quickly, Bulmo says, I'm talking about the cancellation. Again, the problem here is the fact that government is involved. If a private company kicks out some, I'll bring like somewhat of an example. I think Ben and Jerry's is, one of them is leaving the company because they basically sold out to some corporation that I think started selling in Israel or something like that. I will find it funny. I will find it funny that a bunch of socialists sold out to a capitalist firm and then they have to leave because that firm is actually being capitalist. I find that pretty funny. But once
but
government is involved, then
Bulmus asked an interesting question. I kind of dealt with it. So I wrote an essay for the Objective Standard. You can go check it there, talking about the Kimmel problem. The issue is, yeah, if there had been no coercive threat and ABC just decided to can or suspend or whatever Jimmy Kimmel, then that would have been their business, their affair, and it would have been a different thing. But the minute you have the FCC commissioner saying, "Hey, that's a nice network. Be ashamed if something happened to it," now the waters are muddied, and you can't tell whether ABC's response is internal or the result of external pressure. So you're kind of forced, if you're going to uphold free speech, to resist the governmental pressure and say, hey, this is classic job owning. Job owning is it's a term that Lyndon Johnson used to describe when he would basically grab an opponent and lead them short of coercion to where he wanted them to be. And it was just the power of his personality and the tacit threats. Like, again, lovely thing you have there. Be ashamed if something happened to it with my incredible power of regulatory control over your life. That's coercion. It was the same way when the Biden administration used government power to tell social media companies, hey, we have a COVID line and we want that carried, and anything that diverges from that line should get squelched. Again, you could agree or disagree with the speech that was being squelched, but the minute government stepped into the mix, you have to uphold the principle that speech must be free. So you're kind of stuck with it. And again, it's not necessarily whether you agree or disagree with the speaker or his ideas. It's their right to speak free of coercion and your reciprocal need for that right to be protected in yourself. And I'm not going to compromise on my speech. I'm not going to compromise on others' speech, even if I disagree with it.
let's listen to the next clip.
Then we got into a specific topic, which was banning private equity from buying residential real estate. And the idea behind that is private equity is the biggest bankers in the world, basically. They're the biggest financial institutions. And they've started to buy all of our homes. Now, that creates a huge number of problems. Number one, it drives up housing prices. That is why they are artificially high, because so much more demand has come into the market. And I went to Wharton Business School, so this is not complicated, though. This is Econ 101, supply and demand, right? And so, secondly, the number one wealth creation asset that the American family has is their homes. That is how we created the greatest middle class the world has ever seen. And they're taking that from us. And they're going to turn us all into renters. And then we're going to be indentured servants to them. Okay?
So I don't know if I even want to make this more of a rant against home ownership or on what he specifically says. But again, sort of saying banning private equity. Again, what are private equity? It's companies. It's individuals who have business and are doing something with that. And when he says sort of we should ban them to bring it up, I'm wondering who but private equities are actually building up those houses. I'm wondering to what extent if you killed a bunch of demand, what would happen with the supply? I have a few things that
Well,
I'll bring up later, and just
yes.
one quick thing is I think it's always the question should be when you hear somebody talk, you should always ask what is the solution, and this is not a solution to the housing crisis in America. I'm not going to deny that there is a housing crisis, but it's not a solution to stop people from buying them.
I gotta see it. Do I have it even here? Ah, yeah, there it is. Here it is. Oh, it's even right. So, in response to 2008, John Allison, who used to be chairman of BB&T, wrote a couple of good books, and this is one of them on the 2008 housing crisis. And Mr. Allison makes a really compelling case to say that government policy has created a malinvestment in housing. And so the gentleman says that, well, this was a rising asset, and what a wonderful thing, and we need more of it, and private equity is going to destroy it all for us. Well, no. If you have a government policy that's steering people into homes where they otherwise buy homes, and you have this expectation that the value of a home is just going to increase because, and that it's not a item of consumption. And that's something that Mr. Allison very eloquently states, is that housing is consumption. It's not an asset that appreciates. It's something that wears out. And if you mislabel it, you cause all kinds of problems. And so here our friend has mislabeled housing, damned private equity for getting involved, but forgets all the government regulation that is also responsible for the increase of housing. And by the way, an increase in the value of housing that he just said out of one corner of his mouth was a good thing, because it's this appreciating asset. Well, if it's an appreciating asset, how is it becoming more affordable? No, it's increasing in value. Same house is more valuable today than it was yesterday. Why? What's changed? It's only gotten older. It's only getting more worn out. It only needs more maintenance. So, that he's able to smuggle so many lies. I mean, as I say, it's a falsehood on top of a lie. He doesn't understand, despite his Wharton pedigree, what's driving the market here. And then he blames the boogeyman, rich people with money. Well, there you go. It's those rich people. We could only control them, everything would be fine. And I mean, my goodness, that's just so bad.
Yeah, actually, housing as a consumption is an idea that I was playing around in my head for a little bit, and I'm happily surprised that somebody like John Allison actually already mentioned it. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've covered most of the points I was going to make, but yeah, absolutely. When it comes to, I mean, he said that it's the biggest wealth building for people. There's so many wrong things going on here. And one thing you mentioned, right? It's when it comes to building houses, your biggest problem are not corporations, are not, oftentimes it's not even government, it's NIMBY, not in my backyard. It's other people, houses who are saying, no, you cannot build a house close to me because it means a price of my house will go down since the supply will go down. So, as you said, affordable housing or housing becoming more available means the death to basically the people becoming rich or more wealthy from owning houses. This is like you cannot have both. Like fundamentally, you cannot. I don't even have the right word for it, but it's basically an equation that goes against each other. And you cannot do anything about it. And it's, of course, the fault of the government because the government has decreed, or the Fed has decreed, that there is going to be a 2% inflation every single year, which what means if you save money, you're a sucker. If you borrow money, you're a beneficiary. And if you can borrow money against something to leverage that, you are the king. And that's why home ownership became such a thing. Again, it's because of the government. As you said, like just anybody who owns a house, take your year over house. The roof breaks down, something goes wrong in the attic, something goes wrong, inside of a house. Every year, the house should depreciate, yet magically, well, not magically, it makes sense. The price of it goes up not every single year, but goes up substantially above inflation. Even something else is playing a role here. again, this is not necessarily argument against home ownership. I think, yeah, you should probably own a house, or if it makes sense, you should.
If it makes sense, because again, that's the interesting that John Allison makes, is that there are lots of people who would benefit just from renting, and to push the cost of ownership and the responsibility of ownership onto someone who's better at it, more interested in it, whatever. So, there's a case for renting. What right now you have is a distortion in the market, and we have an opponent who's simultaneously decrying it and yet wants it because he, again, sees the accruing asset and thinks that that's real money, not a sleight of hand caused by government edict. And so that and Allison is unequivocal in that this is a recipe for disaster, and we are looking at ruin if we continue to go down this path. And it's a very sobering warning. And like I said, I heartily recommend every book that I've read by him was a good book in my opinion. So I heartily recommend those texts to people who would be interested.
We have a super chat from Michael. Thank you so much. He says, as the left becomes more socialist and the right becomes more nationalist, the two will eventually merge into national socialism as we are seeing now. Yeah, I'm really wondering how, well, I don't think it will happen like that, or at least in every single rise of totalitarianism. I don't think we ever had an example of the left and right sort of becoming together. It's usually and this is what I think I'm seeing with the left right now. It's oftentimes left is much more disjointed and the right is much more united. So what you oftentimes see is like somebody like Cheng Uyghur will actively, I mean, if you look at their channel, probably more than half of their videos are against the Democrats, which is supposedly their own party. You have many people on the left that wouldn't vote for Kamala Harris or wouldn't vote for Joe Biden, which you might think that they are wrong, but if you are on the left, the sort of choice should be pretty easy for you. But this is, and if we are to draw, as we always like to do, the parallels in Nazi Germany, that was the problem with SPD and KPD, right? That the communists didn't want to participate properly in the elections. Adolf Hitler was able to consolidate power because the left was split. So I think if something is, well, that will be like a big prediction. But if we go historically, usually what you see happen is that the left becomes way too disjointed to basically stand up to opposition, and the right basically fully takes over. So here is my call me in. Let's hope never, because it won't happen in America. But if it, I don't want to say that word. So let's just hope it will never happen. We still have a bit more clips. Do you any thoughts, or should we
Yeah, let's go see the next clip.
So okay, so it would be this one.
And the way that they are doing this is they are giving collectively billions of dollars to our politicians. So this issue connects, actually, the money in politics issue connects to everything. Connects to corporate rule, it connects to capitalism, by the way, which I want to get back to, connects to Israel, because it isn't about Israel or any other particular lobby being evil or dastardly or in charge. It's the money that's in charge. And so if Big Pharma, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, etc., give money to our politicians, well, then they pass absurd laws like we're not allowed to negotiate drug prices.
Right.
What in the world? In capitalism, you're not allowed to negotiate prices? Right?
I know.
So, and we talked about that, and he said, you're right, that is absurd. And we on the right already believe that it's absurd and that it's against capitalism. Fantastic.
So here is another thing they found they agree about. I'm wondering what is like Cheng's Uyghur definition of capitalism, because if your definition of capitalism is the government that through Medicare took control over basically what you call that insurance of a bunch of people, and now have the power to collectively basically control the access to those people. Somehow, if they negotiate the prices, that's more capitalistic. Again, we are already so deep into mixed economy that I don't think we can even talk about like
Right.
capitalism anyway. Because it's like when people ask what should the interest rate of the Fed be? What is the capitalist interest rate of the Fed? I don't know. That question makes no sense.
The terms are meaningless. Yeah. So a monopsony. So you have a monopoly, which is when you have one producer. A monopsony is when you have one buyer, or a coercive pile of buyers. So what he's saying is we want to create a government monopsony, and isn't that capitalism? And I mean, it's like you said, it's just so bad. It's so bad. And there's Tucker Carlson laughing like an idiot in agreement. And where's the free market voice which says stop? There's a better way. Not to be found in this crew. It's disheartening. It's disheartening.
And even earlier, he brought up sort of the billions of dollars that are going to politicians. He talks about Cenk Uyghur's problem for a long time was this idea of money in politics, which again, that's free speech, that's free expression. It's the idea that, hey, I like this politician. I would like to better his chances of getting elected. So I'll support his campaign through different means, either through directly monetary or some different way. If that is being shut down, that's attack on my ability to basically, argue for what I want to see in politics, argue what kind of person I want to represent me. So this is another example of this. And when I'm not sure if fully on this specific point they agreed with the populist right, but it is an attack on free speech of basically wanting to limit or regulate the amount of money people can spend on campaigns or donations or anything in that regard. Any thoughts on that, or we can go to next clip?
No, I one more time, brilliantly said, Daniel.
Somebody says Nicholas and even Daniel not catching on the real convo happening between Cenk
I
and
saw
Tucker.
that. I noticed that.
Yeah, just quickly, if you think we're missing something,
tell me.
If you think we're missing something, post it in the chat. In the meantime, yeah, let's watch next clip, which I think it will have some good stuff.
But on these economic issues, we have begun to agree. And why? Because the average guy is getting screwed.
Yes.
Period. It doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right. You're both going to get screwed. You're both going to have higher housing prices. You're both going to have lower wages. You're both going to have higher drug prices. And the people that brought you that is the donor class. And so when we agreed to that, then I said, okay, well, now conversation has become productive. We're not just yelling at each other. For the first time ever, we are talking to one another, and more importantly, we are listening to one another.
Again, he brings up the donor class.
I see what PB Law says. Tucker's bought by Qatar, and yeah, the two of them unite. Yeah, okay.
I mean, they don't really talk about Israel that much. I think even with Tucker, with all his things, he started, and I don't even want to say grifting. He was getting on that populist route for a long time. For maybe, I mean, it might have started. No, I think it started around the housing crisis, or I think in early 2000s he was sort of like the free market libertarian on Fox. But I think with the housing crisis and then following Obama, I think is when he started becoming this populist. So I don't think that thing has changed him that much.
That's interesting because why did the free market? Why did the housing bubble? Why did the 2008 crisis happen in the first place? It was because government gave incentives for lenders to make irrational risks, and there's a whole host of them, from guaranteeing the loans, which is the biggest, to tax treatment, up and down the line. Housing is favored. And again, that's a malinvestment. And whenever you have a malinvestment, you're going to have bubbles. And so the walkaway would be, we should divorce the state from picking favorites and steering people one way or another, and let the market allocate, the most wise use of our resources based on a free price, a freely determined price, not a price pushed by government preference. But no. Oh, the corporations again. The corporations are the problem, and the little guy gets screwed. Well, yeah, there are a lot of little guys who got screwed, who lost their homes or anything like that. But point the finger where it exists, at the people who elect government leaders who enact irrational policies that distort the market. And then when the chickens come to roost, blame the very market that was distorted. There's your problem.
Well, just quickly, people says, did you hear Tucker at Charles' funeral? We talked about it on, was it yesterday's episode or the day before? So you can check out all the episodes where we did bring, I think it was Monday, the reality show. So check out the reality show 2 days ago. Now,
I was laughing. I saw your guys' headline. I was laughing. The hummus eaters.
Well, but that's what he said. That was his secret.
You know those hummus eaters. You can't. They're just nothing but trouble.
And yeah, I mean, just when it comes to Cheng always talks about the donor class, but look at all the issues in America and show me one thing where the population wants something and they are not getting it from the government. Because from everything I've seen, basically everything has a popular consensus that basically the people agree generally with what the government is doing. Again, you can look at what Trump is doing and you have a section of population applauding it. So a lot of it is simply, that's what people want. The American government especially, I think, is pretty responsive to what the people want, especially since it has so many ways to make that possible. So trying to blame it on some rich people, I think Cheng Yuger is just a few years away from blaming it on specific kind of rich people, specific kind of with certain heritage rich people. I think he still has to make that step, but it's usually anti-capitalism and anti-Semitism usually do not have that far away from each other. But yeah, I know, Nicholas, you have to leave and we're wrapping up. So any last thoughts before, and where can people find you before we go?
Oh, well, like I said, I just wrote an article on the free speech kerfuffle for the Objective Standard. So please take a look there, and you can find me on Substack. And thanks so much for having me. I know you guys got the Irreplaceable Spark Conference coming up soon, and that sounds really exciting. So, I encourage people to take a look at that and see if that's up their alley. Where is that? That's in LA?
It's in Orange County,
California. Okay.
So yeah, people can check out objectivism.co.uk to find out more about that. Just to summarize this episode, we've learned that the left and the right agree on hating corporate rule, which we as found out simply means capitalism and companies doing what makes sense for them individually. They have a problem with private equity, which again means simply free market, people acting on their own self-interest. Money in politics, which means free speech, what people want to support when it comes to representatives. And if you go further and further, at the end of the day, is anything of America left that they do not want to destroy? I think we've summarized it pretty well. So thank you, Nicholas, for
on that happy note. Oh boy.
Well, let's hope
that's all
something. With that,
thanks a lot to all the super chats. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nicholas, for joining me. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and bye-bye.
Take care.